I'm super happy to have in the studio with me Kathleen Rogers. She's the president of the Earth Day Network, earthday.org, and marchforscience.com also. Another one of your websites. Do I have that right?
Yeah, well, we're March for Science / Earth Day. There are two websites because we have two groups.
Oh, okay, great. Well, tell me about Earth Day Network.
We are the organization that came out of the first Earth Day, which was founded by Gaylord Nelson, Senator Gaylord Nelson, and Dennis Hayes. Dennis is still actively involved in Earth Day. He's our emeritus chair, runs a foundation, really nice boss. And we have, over the course of the last close to 50 years, we're coming up to our 50th anniversary, expanded way beyond the United States, and we're now in 192 countries with about 1 billion people participating in Earth Day worldwide.
Which specific day is Earth Day and why that day?
Can't believe you have to ask me that question.
Earth
Day is April 22nd. They just kept it like some other major holidays the same day every year, like Christmas is on the 25th, right. Earth Day is on the 22nd. Right. So regardless of the day of the week, this year it's a Saturday, which makes it fun for everybody.
Good.
So it's April 22nd.
Why? Any idea why that day was picked?
I think, and it's really interesting because when I was hired, the organization had been around for a while, and I began my job tragically right after September 11th, so I had a lot of time to sit around and think about and find out and research about Earth Day. And so I believe the reason they chose it, best historical reference, is because it was in the middle of the week. It was focused originally, before it became Earth Day, it was called an environmental teach-in. So the focus was on college campuses. It was the era of a lot of activity on college campuses, the sort of combination of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, the environmental.
I remember it well.
Yeah. So it's they picked that day of the week to do it as a teach-in. And what's extraordinary about it is, given it was a work day, 20 million people came out on the streets through the efforts. Dennis talks about how they mimeographed everything and sent it by those telephone faxes and that kind of thing. And that was about 10% of our population at the time. And I think it woke a ton of people, particularly politicians, up to the fact that pollution was something that people really cared about. And so as the result of the first Earth Day, President Nixon created EPA, of all things, and many of our, sort of stalwart and critically important environmental laws, many of which have been exported around the world, were passed sort of in quick succession after the first Earth Day. So that was.
But things have changed somewhat. I mean, I remember the late 60s, early 70s, you could fly into any major city, LA was the most conspicuous, and see this giant dome of yellow-gray haze over it. The Cuyahoga River caught on fire in, I think, 68 or 69.
Right. Santa Barbara oil spill.
Yeah, there was just some really horrible stuff. And it was also just a few years after Rachel Carson had published Silent Spring, and we were all getting it, that DDT everywhere was killing off the birds. And there was just a broad consensus that this is no way to live. That seems to be happening in China right now. I mean, they're solarizing faster than any country in the world. But is there still that strength of conviction here in the United States? It almost seems like, people on the left, or just average Americans, I think everybody except the right-wing wackadoodles, have grown complacent. That, we've just taken this assumption, basically, that, the air is clean and the water's...
You can't see it.
So
it isn't bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, every movement has a honeymoon period where things move and move and move, and then people sort of expect, because they go about their daily lives without being as focused, say, for example, as I am on the particulars of environmental protection, they expect to go through their lives and have other people take care of it. And it's true for me for other issues that I care about, but I don't spend my days worrying about. And so I think we went through a honeymoon period. I think industry, and I've worked on both sides of it. I've worked in law firms, supporting compliance by big companies. And so I understand both sides of the issue. And I think what you have is you go through periods where everybody agrees that we have to clean up major pieces of the environment. And then when it starts becoming sort of smaller and smaller, even if those issues are deadly to human health and the environment generally, and the costs increase, there's this automatic tension that corporations, the good ones, have with the environmental community, the broader environmental community. And so in order to build that movement constantly, and Earth Day Network is focused sort of at the bottom of the pyramid. It's not the coolest work in the world, but what we do is bring people into the movement and hope we can educate them and activate them and get them engaged in higher and higher levels of civic participation around the world. It's critically important. And so industry got smart, and they began to fight back in a very organized way, often meant much more, with a lot more money.
We lost the Superfund, for example.
Yeah, we've lost, a number of battles. There are many people in industry that are just extraordinary people. Paul Pullman from Unilever. I mean, they're just, HP does a great job. There are lots of companies that do extraordinary work, but then there are other companies whose livelihood depends on polluting the earth. And so it's not in their best interest economically to not fight those battles.
Might we now be at a moment? I mean, here we had yesterday, I believe it was, maybe today, the White House sent out a press release that plagiarized an entire paragraph from an ExxonMobil press release.
I saw that.
We've got Scott Pruitt running the EPA, the guy who has sued the EPA 14 times and whose emails are coming out now. We're discovering that he's been colluding with Devon Energy and Koch Industries and other major polluters. And now he's in charge of environmental protection. Is this the natural process of the disintegration of the consensus, or is this a tipping point, an informing point? Is this so egregious that Americans are going to rise up, or are we not yet there?
I think it's really a combination of things. And I think in every movement building, I mean, the progressive movement is based on the word progress, right? And it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And there's a certain tension and sort of rubber band effect where you're moving along. It's perceived of costing more money at the time to implement. I mean, a great example of this is the auto industry, which many moons ago, decades ago, spent the 2017 equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars trying to fight seatbelts.
I remember.
And now that's all they do is sell safety. And that's a good thing. But when it appeared to be sort of against their financial interests, they mounted these giant battles. And so as we move slowly but surely, away from fossil fuels, there are people in the industry that, live their lives for the status quo, make a lot of money, and don't intend to give up without a good fight. I think you're seeing that right now. It's the public is somewhat inured to environmental issues. I mean, look what happened at Flint, the Deepwater Horizon. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. People get excited, then they fall back, and they, again, go back their daily lives. So I think what we're seeing is just a pullback, but the green movement's inexorable. It's moving forward.
Well, I hope so. I certainly hope so, because there have been a few setbacks. Is there any, I mean, typically in movement building or anything else, it's good to have a narrative and it's good to have an example. And, the Cuyahoga River catching on fire was a big deal back in the day. Is Flint, I mean, and we know now there are 3,000 communities in the United States that have water supplies that are as bad or worse than Flint. And it's getting virtually no publicity. Nobody's contesting the fact. But is there something, other than poisoned water, lead in our water, or is that the thing? I mean, is there going to be a focus for Earth Day this year?
Well, interestingly, and part of the reason we teamed up with the March for Science people was because our global theme for 2017, which will last through our 50th, is global climate and environmental literacy. It's a focus on science. So we're running campaigns in 192 countries to encourage governments and school boards to teach their kids what they need to know about the 21st century, how to get jobs, what's the green movement about, prepare them for investment, because the people who aren't trained and educated in environment and science are not going to get the kind of investment they need to pull themselves out of deep poverty or continue to be leading the economic world. So we're pushing this agenda globally, not because we want to control what people think or prove ourselves, but because it's really good for business. And so many countries are coming to us and saying, how do we prepare our country for green investment? Because they want that investment in their country. They don't want to be making little umbrellas for drinks. They want to be making systems. They want to be making solar panels. They want to be educating their people so that they have jobs. So whoever, wins the green revolution race is going to be the next king of the economy. If it turns out to not be the U.S., I'll be really disappointed, because we got the brains and education. China's doing a bang-up job. Never would have said so. Right. Lots of countries are pulling ahead in various things. Now, of course, China has enormous pollution problems. India does. I have 3 offices in India, and when I was there the last time, I mean, the ground level pollution was bright orange, and in some places I couldn't see my feet. It was brutal. So, well, but yet we have tremendous problems in our country. It's not as if the people at EPA, and particularly the enforcement and compliance divisions, aren't incredibly good people, but rather than cut their funding, they should be increasing their funding, because in the end, this saves lives. It saves children's lives. I mean, pushing back rules on putting mercury and arsenic and cadmium and chromium in our water is a really bad deal, not just for poor people who don't have a voice, but for all of us. When I'm eating tuna fish sandwiches, I'm consuming mercury.
Well, and there's not just also the personal self-interest. One of the things that we know about lead in drinking water, for example, is that it depresses IQ and increases violent behavior.
Exactly.
Throughout the lifetime of the person. So, you know, every community that we're inflicting with lead-contaminated water, we're also producing a generation of damaged people, and many of them damaged in ways that cause them to end up criminal.
You know, in the case of Flint, 41% of the people that live there are below the poverty line. It's not as if they didn't have ample warning. They switched. The township was in, or the city was in receivership. They flipped the water from, you know, the Great Lakes to the Flint River, and, you know, sort of the rest is history. And I think when you don't have a voice and you don't have the economic well-being to fight the right fight, it took people, particularly moms and a few pediatricians and other people in Virginia Tech, months and months and months to convince both local authorities and EPA that they were that there was a real problem in Flint. And that problem is repeated not just with lead, but with other issues around the world thousands of times a day. I mean, we all suffer from it, whether it's tree cutting or lead or mercury in our water, and rollbacks aren't going to help.
Right. Kathleen, we're going to hit a hard break here in a minute or so. Can you quickly tell us about the March for Science, marchforscience.com? We have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so Earth Day Network is partnering with some terrific young scientists who came up with the idea. It's being organized worldwide. We're combining marches with teach-ins around the world, which is really fun. And so we'll have a large event on the National Mall that I hope will be well attended. Having been through many Earth Days on the Mall, I know that it could be 40 degrees and raining buckets, so I'm knocking on wood that the weather's good, because it'll be great to have a whole new constituency come to the fore to talk about what's important. They're there not just because of environmental issues by a long shot. They're there because they really care about the integrity of facts and science. And it is, after all, chemistry and physics and all these things, sort of the basis for all humanity. And so they know how to get it right, and we should listen to them. And so I think they'll be there to tell us a lot of stories, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Any word on how many scientists are being laid off here in D.C.? You know,
well, I think you have to look at budgets. You know, submitting a budget doesn't mean that's going to be the budget. I've been around a long time, so I don't get hysterical over every single thing I see coming out of whatever. Right. You tend to have, you know, be a little bit better about it. There are lots of Republicans and Democrats that aren't going to allow some of these budget cuts to move forward. They just won't. They have constituents who are suffering from environmental issues, and they're not. I don't think they're going to let them down, regardless of their party affiliation. Some will, and I think we'll see some dramatic budget cuts. But it's, you know, we'll see what happens. I mean, we have to be relentlessly focused on the things that really matter, particularly human health and the environment and climate change. We have to be. We also don't want to let the rest of the world down, which is moving forward, thanks to us, to develop, you know, a green economy and take care of their own pollution. But I hate to think we'd send the wrong signals to the rest of the world as we go about regrouping or whatever's happening to us right now.
So the March for Science is happening on the 22nd of April also?
Earth Day. Yes,
Earth Day.
on Earth Day. And it'll be on the National Mall and the Monument Grounds. We'll be building a stage, and then there'll be a march down Constitution. Congress is out, but I'm sure the local marches around the country and actually around the world will get a lot of press, which we'll be grateful for.
Kathleen Rogers, the president of the Earth Day Network, earthday.org, and marchforscience.com. Thank you, Kathleen.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.